Our Take is discussing the multi-billion-dollar sex trade industry and its youngest victims, child prostitutes. Nevada lawmaker and former federal law enforcement officer, Assemblyman John Hambrick, joins us via Skype. In Nevada, Stacy Jewel Lewis was sold into the industry when she was just 19 years old. She's been here sharing her story. But also with us is Connie Rock, who travels to Thailand at least twice a year to speak with kids trapped in that country's sex industry, as well as Jennifer Lucy Tyler, who is a minister, motivational speaker, and author who's traveled to Thailand to raise awareness about sex trafficking, but also provide hope and help for young people trying to make a fresh start. And Jennifer, I want to start with you. You go not alone. You go as part of a group, and it's a mission trip. Correct me if I'm wrong.
Correct.
What is that like? How do you approach or gain access to these young men and women who are working the streets?
Well, I was accompanied by a missions leader from an organization called Adventures in Missions. I went on the trip to learn more about the trafficking industry and what was actually taking place on the ground, and to be a part of that. And the way that you gain access is simply by building relationships. So you go into the different bar areas and you begin to just build relationships with people that you meet, and that's how the access is gained.
So when you go into the bar, I'm assuming, correct me if I'm wrong, when you initially approach a young girl or boy, they're probably thinking that you want something else from them other than to have a conversation. How do you shift that dialogue?
Absolutely, because they're used to people wanting something from them. But the way that we would go into the bars is to simply just show our love and to just express God's love to them. We would often use bracelets, friendship bracelets, to give to the women that were working in the bars, and that would draw them to us for conversation. So it would open the door for us to dialogue with them.
I also want to bring Connie Rock into this conversation. Connie, are you there?
I am.
Oh, hi there, Connie. You two have traveled to Thailand at least twice a year to speak with the kids there. What kind of reception have you received? How many kids have you seen make a change after speaking with them?
Gosh, that's a difficult question. But over the years, I know the first time that we went and took a team, they weren't sure what to think of us. But as the years have gone on, we've built a relationship, like Jennifer referred to, and a trust with them, and they embrace us. They call me Captain. Here I'm a blonde, 6-foot woman marching through the red light districts, and I've got this line of other women following me, and they call me Captain. And so they embrace us. I mean, when those that recognize us will come out and give us big hugs, and we make a point of going back to the same people over and over, and checking up on them. How are you doing? But as far as the kids go, it's really tough with the kids because they're in and they're out. So there's a rotation of kids. Very few kids do we get to see trip after trip. So it's unfortunate, and you have to wonder what happened to those kids.
You know, when I was in the military, I was deployed to Pattaya, Thailand. And while in Thailand, there was a day or so that we had leave, and we were able to go into the town. And there was a young child, a little girl, I'll never forget, who had offered me a rose, wanted me to buy it, and I bought the rose, and then walked away. And for a few feet there, I noticed that somebody was following me. I turned around, the child was still there. Asked her, you know, what more did she need or want, and it turns out that the child was offering herself to me. She was trying to sell herself to me. This child could not have been more than 9 or 10 years old, and that's when I became aware of the sex trade industry in Thailand. So I'm curious, Connie, as well as Jennifer, and Connie, I'll have you go first. What made you guys decide to go to Thailand and focus your efforts there?
Goodness, it starts way back in my childhood. I grew up in South America. My parents were missionaries, and I remember walking in and seeing a woman had just been raped and robbed. And as I got older, I was exposed to more things on my trips, and it was at a Catalyst conference in Atlanta that I heard Gary Haugen from IJM International Justice Mission speak. And he was talking about a girl that they were able to free from captivity there, and she was very young, very, very young. But I think that was my first exposure. And then once while in South Africa, a friend of mine was telling me about a child who was 7 months old who had been raped.
Unbelievable.
Yep.
Yeah, unbelievable. Assemblyman Hambrick, I want to bring you back into the conversation. Clearly what Jennifer and Connie are doing and what groups like theirs are doing are important, are meaningful, but not enough. What is lacking in legislation, in laws? What are the things that need to be in place to make this kind of industry run out of business?
Well, we have one thing on our side that the women that go to Thailand do not, unfortunately, is a culture as this scourge is made known and more lights are shown on it. Domestically here in the United States, people become involved. Unfortunately, in Thailand and in the Balkans, in Central Europe and in the African continent, there's a culture that is entirely different than it is here in this country. So we have a little bit of an easier goal. But we need to, at least here in Nevada, we are going after, we have been the past several years going after the pimps or the traffickers. But in my estimation, we need now to go after the buyers, what they're doing with the monies that they're earning in their business and how they're spending them.
Here in the studio, I see, Stacy, you're just shaking your head, nodding in agreement. Is that what you think needs to happen? Instead of the prostitute being the person who suffers the repercussions, it needs to be the individuals that are paying for the services, the individuals that are pulling the girls off the streets?
And especially when we're talking about children, and because they're not really considered prostitutes, they're actually child victims. And we often have to change our language when we're talking about our children because we have statutory rape laws, meaning that children under the age of 17, 16, 18 cannot even consent to sex. However, a 13 or 14-year-old child can be arrested for prostitution. Wow. Oftentimes in many of our states that's the law and that's the way that it's set up because money has been exchanged from this child's hand to an adult's hand. They get arrested and charged for prostitution while oftentimes these buyers walk free and maybe might get threatened with the sex offenders registry. That's why reports that Shared Hope International came out with, the Protective Innocence Initiative, are so important because they go around to the states and they grade these states. In 2011, New York City received a D. Washington, D.C. received an F. Saying that right now there is no major protection for these child sex trafficking victims right now. So with these reports, states and people in the states, when you're writing to your congressman and you're lobbying, you're talking about what laws need to be paid attention to in your communities, you can go to this report right online to Shared Hope's website, and you can even see what laws need to be dealt with in your state, and then begin to write your congressman.
That's really where the changes come.
That is exactly what.
Jennifer, for what you're doing, I mean, obviously you're ministering to the spiritual and the emotional needs, but absent the teeth, absent the legislation that punishes individuals, you will always be doing this because it's not going to go away.
Yeah, I don't believe that. Our hope and prayer would be that it will go away and that it will be eliminated. But for those people that are victims, they do need they need support, they need love, they need to know that they're loved and that they can be restored. And so myself, along with a group of 29 amazing women, went to Thailand with the desire to just help show love to them, give them hope, and also point them in the direction where they can receive continued help, because there are long-term missionaries that are on the ground living there doing work
day out.
And day in and day out.
All right. Well, thank you all very much, ladies. I truly appreciate you being here with me. Connie Rock, thank you as well for your work traveling to Thailand, as well as Assemblyman John Hambrick from Nevada. Thank you for your efforts efforts in raising awareness and trying to push forward legislation to make this situation certainly better, if not go away altogether. And then also Jennifer Lucy Tyler and Stacy Jewell Lewis. Thank you. And